tried calling him for several days and he just wasn't answering. And so I started to get a little bit nervous that I scared him off. And then after him not answering again, I tried to reach out to him again. I finally got a text from him. And the text read, "Hey, I don't think I can sell. It's not the right time." Welcome to the Ryan Rice Show, where we talk about what we learned yesterday that we can apply today so that we can be better tomorrow. I hope you enjoy and subscribe. My biggest deal ever was a land deal where I acquired 71 acres for a total of $0. And I split it into 10 parcels, by the way, while evicting 12 tenants and spending more than 60 grand to clean up what felt like a junkyard. But I get the question all the time, how the heck did you acquire 71 acres for no money? And I want to walk you through exactly how I closed this deal, all of the crucial conversations I had with the seller, and how I convinced him in the end to deed over the property for $0. Who am I? My name is Ryan Rice. I am a full time real estate investor. I am in my fourth year investing full time, and I share these things in the event that they can make you some more money in your real estate business. So, this deal was a TV commercial lead. I run TV commercials, and the seller saw my commercial and he called in and he asked what I would offer him for his land. And by the way, the call came in after 7:30 p.m. on a Friday night, and I answered it. And who knows, had I not answered the phone, maybe I wouldn't have had this opportunity. Maybe this deal would have fell through because maybe he would have called somebody else and the rest would have been history. But I did answer and we talked for about 5 minutes. He told me kind of what he was looking to do and we scheduled a follow-up call for Monday. So I called him Monday. We talked for a good bit and he told me that he wanted about 500 grand for his land. And he wanted to parcel off about 4 acres in the corner that he could just put a modular home on and then sell the rest. And I didn't really know this particular area very well. It was a little country. It was about 45 minutes outside the city where I was doing regular business. But it was 71 acres, and I was intrigued in this deal. And during the conversation, I said something to him that now I use all the time. And I said, "Hey, if the property qualifies for less than 500K, do you even want us to have a conversation about that?" And what's so funny is I said that just in a very matter of fact and a genuinely curious way. You could even hear in my tone of voice that there was doubt that there was a deal here. And I, was just genuinely curious that if I couldn't pay 500 grand, would he still want to talk? And he told me, "Yeah, I want to see what you come up with." And what's funny is now during sales calls, I use that as a sales tactic, and I almost always ask a similar question, and it usually looks something like, if I'm on an in person appointment, "Hey, Mr. Seller, for some reason I fight hard for you, and it qualifies for less than X. Should I not even come back inside?" Or if I'm on the phone, "Hey, if I can't get you Y, should I not even call you back?" And this has really helped me gauge the seller really well. So, anyways, I thought it was funny that I used that tactic unintentionally that now I'm kind of using all the time. So, I looked into the deal that week after we had that conversation. And I called him back later in the week and asked him for a little bit more time because it was very complex. I didn't have a ton of updates for him because I was still looking into what I could do with this, and he was fine. He appreciated the call back. I called him the following week just to gain clarity on which 4 acres that he wanted. So I knew exactly where it was on the map. And based on the info I had up to this point, I was trying to figure out how I could possibly make a deal here. I had already invested some significant time, and this was the first time where I kind of gauged his willingness to do something creative. And at the time, I didn't even know what it was that I wanted to do yet, but I knew that maybe there was something here, especially if we could do something creative. So I asked him, "Mr. Seller, are you, let me ask you, are you open to working with me here? And, if it means I can get you the highest price, is that like, can you work with me a little bit?" And he was like, "Yeah." I said, "Okay, well, maybe he's got some flexibility and he's willing to work with me." So we hung up, did some more research. I called him the next day And this was a call, we built really good rapport on this call. We talked about all of his pets, his dogs, his cats, his home life, a little bit on his family. And I sent him a picture of what I thought he was proposing to me as far as as to the 4 acres that he wanted. And while I was waiting for him to receive the picture, I just checked in with him and I said, "Hey, what are your thoughts thus far? How are you feeling about everything?" And I kind of just wanted to gauge where he was at. And this was good because I got insight onto where he was with our conversations up to this point. And he just kind of told me that it all depended on what kind of price that I presented. And then I asked him, "Well, hey, do you have any plans for all of the cash that you're going to get?" And so we both knew that he was going to use some of the cash to put a modular on the 4 acres, but he was going to have a lot of that cash left over. And so I asked him if he had plans for it. And he told me, "No, I haven't really given it much thought." And it was at that point where I was like, let me see if I can ask him about seller financing. And so I said, "Hey, well, one thing we could do," and I said, "Are you familiar with seller financing?" And not the greatest sales tactic there. I probably could have worded that better, but he wasn't familiar with it. I explained high level what it was, and I asked if he would be interested in potentially pursuing that. And he said, "Yeah, I would be open to it." So we ended that call, and I went and I did even more research. And what was funny, when I first underwrote this deal, the split that I kind of had in my mind, it was terrible. The first rendition, I went on the local GIS, which stands for Geographic Information Systems. And it was one where I could like draw out some different parcels and it, it looked absolutely terrible. But it was a really good lesson in, just start because the first rendition actually turned into something pretty cool and a really, really special deal. But that first split that I kind of drew up, I did the math after pulling comps, and I thought that maybe we would be looking at around like 550 to 600,000 in total revenue, and that involved something a little bit different than what he told me he wanted. But I was trying to maximize the price, and so I called him the following week, and so now a couple weeks have already passed by. Right, as we've done research, we've talked about this. And I proposed to him something that was a little bit different than what he had communicated to me that he wanted, right? He told me he wanted 4 acres. I actually proposed for him to keep about 20 acres and went through why. And he pretty much shut that down. He's like, "No, I don't want to do that. I just want to get rid of all of it but 4 acres." And so again, I asked him, "Well, are you open to doing something a little bit creative?" And he said, "Yes." And so this was the first time where I proposed this level of detail to the deal. So I said, "Hey, I think I could get you close to what you want. But what we would do is we would have to get you to deed me the property. And then I would start to split and sell off other parts of this land. And then I could get you your 500K in that part as I'm selling off the other portion. And that's how I would get you your proceeds. Are you open to something like that?" And then, of course, that just generated a ton of questions, right? He was like, "Well, how would you do it?" I explained him some of the details based on what I knew at that point, and basically told him he would seller finance the entire parcel to me. I would split and sell off the lots, and then I would get him paid as I sell them off. And he asked me, "Can I have time to think about it?" And a quick side note here, because this land was a little rural, it was really, really difficult for me to underwrite at the time. I really had no idea how much I mean, I had a general idea, but it was hard for me to sharpen the pencil due to this deal, right? So I struggled knowing exactly how much I could sell this land for, but I knew and I sensed that there was something here. And if I could get into this deal with little to no risk and still get him what he wanted, that seemed like it was a win win. And so that's kind of how I came up with it. It wasn't exceedingly attractive for me to give him 500K cash based on what I was underwriting at first. And then I go do my thing, which in hindsight, that may have actually been better, but this worked out really well. So anyway, he asked me for time to think about it, and I said, "Yes, of course." And I remember I had just seen or heard some sort of talk track from a sales training. I don't even remember what sales training it was, or where I saw it, or where I heard it. But the talk track told you to say something like this when someone says, "Can I think about it?" Hey, Mr. Seller, I am so sorry. I apologize. Typically, when people say, "Hey, can I have time to think about it?" it's usually just a nice way of people telling me no, and they don't want to hurt my feelings. And so I must have miscommunicated something. Is there, do you feel that I'm not working towards a solution for you? And so I said exactly that. And he was like, "Oh, no, 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 no. I just want to give it some more thought." And I really struggled in the moment to overcome this objection. And I even tried one more time. And in hindsight, I think I could have just said, yeah, absolutely, take whatever time you need. And so that I can prepare for our next conversations, what are some things that you might be thinking about? And then we could have addressed those then, but I didn't say that. And I struggled in the moment to overcome that objection. And so I tried calling him a couple days later. I didn't get a response. I finally got him on the phone and I asked what he thought. And he asked again, well, how would it work? How would he get his money so he could set up his modular? He would obviously want that in the beginning. And he was like, I just think there could be some hiccups there. And so we worked through that objection a bit. And he was really silent for a few seconds. And then he changed the subject and he asked about the Chiefs. This was right after the Super Bowl in 2023. And he asked about the Chiefs. And then there was this really long, awkward silence. And it was so long and awkward that when I listened to the recording, I actually started my phone timer because I wanted to see how long the silence was. And it must have been very uncomfortable to me. But I timed out 24 seconds that him and I were both silent. And it was after 24 seconds, I finally broke the silence and I said, "So what do you think, Mr. Seller? Should we get this rolling for you?" And he said, "Yeah, I suppose." And so in that moment, I thought I had it. I told him I'd work up an agreement and I would get back to him. And it took me a couple of days to get with my attorney, work something up that would make any sense. And finally, I got something and I tried calling him for several days and he just wasn't answering. And so I started to get a little bit nervous that I scared him off. And then after him not answering again, I tried to reach out to him again. I finally got a text from him. And the text read, "Hey, I don't think I can sell. It's not the right time." And man, did my heart drop. I actually very vividly remember when I read that text because I had put so many countless hours into this deal and so much time building so much rapport with him and investing in him so that we could get him to where he wanted to go. And it just felt like a shot through the heart. All of the energy that I had in that moment completely left, and I just felt incredibly deflated. And I tried texting him a few times. He didn't respond, of course. Real quick, as you guys know, I just recently started this podcast. If you could give it a rating with a quick tap of the thumb, that would mean the world to me. And even more importantly, it could help spread the word to a broader audience, which in turn could help change a life. Thank you so much, and let's get back to the show. And what was interesting in the meantime, after he, sent me that text message, I had been reaching out to a local agent that knew land in this area really well. And so I worked with her and we drew up this plan. And the plan that we drew up had the potential to exceed 800 grand in total revenue. And so, side note, always reach out to a great agent who knows the area well. This agent, she's the one that I ended up working with. She was amazing. And we drew up that initial plan, which was different than what we ended up doing, but it was the initial plan that even gave a little bit more hope into the deal. And I was thinking we would generate 550 to 600 in revenue. We drew up a plan that would generate about 800 in revenue, and this felt really good. And I even tried texting him, like using that as bait, like, "Hey, I got some news. I got some good news for you," but he still didn't respond. And so the weekend came and the weekend passed. I tried to call him again the following week and he still wasn't responding. And so I sent him another text message And the text message was, I remember feeling at this point, this was like my last resort, right? I didn't know what else to do. I said something to the effect of, Mr. Seller, I'm here to serve you. If it's not the right time, no worries at all. But I just wanted to connect to ensure that we're aligned. And I probably shouldn't have done this, but I think I even put a little bit of guilt in the text, and I said something like, "Hey, I just put in so much time. I just want to make sure that we're both on the same page and we're aligned." And he actually responded to this text rather quickly. And so I instantly asked if I could call him, and he said yes. And so my heart skipped about 10 beats. There was this flood of energy that rushed back into my body, and I called him. And I had no idea at the time, but this would be the most crucial phone call of our relationship to date. And it turned out to be an incredibly important conversation. So when I got him on the phone, he told me that he started thinking about his dad and that his dad would kill him if he sold this property. So, uh, his dad used to own this property. His dad passed away, and he got this property through his dad passing. And so we talked about that for a little bit, and I really just empathized with him. And then I dropped that bomb on him that I had partnered with someone with some really good land knowledge in the area. And I told him that I thought I could actually get him more than $500,000. And instantly his demeanor changed. And he curiously replied, "Well, really?" And so I walked him through what that might look like. And I told him that he would need to be comfortable with us doing something a little creative, and that it would take a ton of work, but that I would make good money and he would get more than 500 grand. And I said, "Hey, I just wanted to give you that update." And I also said, sometimes when people tell me that it's not the right time, there's something that I've said that has made them uncomfortable. And so I wasn't sure if maybe I made you uncomfortable with what I was pitching, or, and then he jumped in and he said, "Well, I was uncomfortable with what you were pitching. I just don't see how it would work without a bunch of hiccups." And so we started to work through that. And so that ended up being a crucial part of that conversation, when I said, "Hey, sometimes when people tell me it's not the right time, I've made them feel uncomfortable in some way." And that rooted out the fact that he actually was uncomfortable. And I hadn't had those details yet as far as what exactly he was feeling. And so he said, "Yeah, I just don't think it's going to work. There's going to be a bunch of hiccups." And so we actually worked through that a little bit. We talked about that in detail. And then there was another long silence. And then he shifted back to dad. And he shifted back to how dad would be pissed if he sold the house. And so I said, "Well, do you think dad would be upset if you put more than 500 grand in your pocket?" And he said, "Well, I think he'd be happy about that, but selling the property would just hit him really hard." And so I put it out there, right? I said, "Maybe it would. Maybe two, though. Is there a chance he could be happy? I mean, I imagine that amount of money might be really good for you." And he said, "Yeah, I could get that trailer. I could start living the good life." And I really took advantage of that opportunity. And I asked him, "Well, what could you do with an extra $500,000?" And then he told me everything he could do with an extra 500 grand. And he named a whole bunch of things. And one of the last things he said included helping one of his friends out. And I said, "Well, I'm sure that would make your dad happy, helping people." And then he went on this long thing about how his dad was always helping people. Even if his dad knew that he wasn't going to get anything in return, his dad had a big heart. He was big into helping people. And so then we kind of went into this tangent and we talked about dad for a while. And I told him, I said, "Wow, dad seems like an absolutely great man." And there was silence again. And he went back to, I'm just really worried this isn't going to work." And I said, "Yeah, Mr. Seller, look, why don't we go through that? Let's say that it doesn't work. What happens then?" That's a normal thing to be worried about. Let's go through what is our worst case scenario so that we understand exactly what would happen. And so I walked through the worst case scenario with him. And I told him that if the worst case scenario happened and I couldn't sell any land, I would just deed the property back to him and he'd have no cost. And so I said, let's look at exactly what would happen. And if we're okay with the worst case scenario, in this case, the downside is that I do all the work, I can't sell the land, and you get the property back. And I told him, I think I can live with that. And I just paused and was silent. And he said, yeah, I can live with that. And then he went back to dad. And I said, yeah, so it seems like the main issue at play here is how do you want to handle dad? How do you want to handle the fact that maybe he might be pissed? And I said, do you think there's a chance that he might be happy for you? Or, is it something that you just want to keep it that way you can stay attached to him and, you know, you just got to figure out what you want to do. Is there a chance though that maybe he would be happy? Maybe he would want you to sell it. Maybe not. I really don't know. You would know better than I would. And then I was just silent again. And he let out a big sigh. I could hear him on the phone. And there was this really long silence again. And he broke the silence and he said, well, let's go ahead. Right. And it was that moment that he made the decision to go for it. So from there, had my attorney work up the agreement. We got it signed. And we actually ended up having to modify the plan a bit because the initial plan was for him to sell our finance at an initial cost of $0. And then I would pay him, X percent of future land sales and me Y percent. But title couldn't figure out how to transfer the deed for $0. And so we actually pivoted. My attorney had the idea of him quit claiming the deed into an LLC that him and I both had ownership of, and then that gave me the ability to do what I needed to do, and then we could work that out from there. So that was it. There was a very long process, and there was a time where I thought I was gonna actually lose the deal. There was a time I thought where I actually did lose the deal. I put a ton of time and effort into it, but it turned out that that time and effort paid off. And I think there were a few key things that I did in that conversation that I just want to highlight. And so I'm going to highlight 7 things that I think I did really well that I'm going to carry forward in my next conversations with sellers. The first thing, I built very good rapport with him. He trusted me 1,000%, which, by the way, I never met him in person. We live 500 miles apart. I did all of this over the phone, never met the guy. But I was able to communicate with him in a way that we built really, really good rapport. And I know that he trusted me 1,000%. The second thing I did, I really listened to what it was that he wanted. And when I realized what he wanted costed a little bit less than how much he would have to put in his then or when I realized that what he wanted costed less than how much he would put in his pocket from the sale, that's when I asked him if he was open to something creative. So, based on the information that he gave me, I saw a window for a creative deal because he didn't have plans for the rest of the cash. And I asked him if he was open to it. The third thing I did is I followed up consistently and I stayed in constant communication with him. And so, even in the beginning, when I was doing due diligence, when I was underwriting, when I was just doing research, I would just call and tell him, like, hey, I don't have an update. I'm still doing research, but I want to make sure you know that I'm still here. I'm still interested. This is just kind of complex and I'm looking into it. The fourth thing I did is I helped him break this belief that he had about how his father would feel if he sold it, right? And I think that's important because a lot of times I communicate with sellers and there is some roadblock, and a lot of times it's this belief that they have about a certain subject. And so many times just exploring the fact that maybe that belief is true, but also what if there's this alternative belief over here? And that's always kind of a helpful path to walk down. And notice I am never trying to tell the seller that what they feel is wrong. I'm just exploring a possibility with them, right? They have a certain belief, and I acknowledge and I empathize with that belief, but then I explore the potential of an alternative belief and we talk through that together. And in this case, that helped him break through the belief that his father would be upset if he sold the land, which, of course, his father couldn't have all of the context of what was going on with his situation and all those tenants that were on the property, right? He didn't actually know. He just was feeling the guilt. And so we were able to work through that together. The fifth thing I did is I proposed to him that he would get more than what he was asking for. And that really piqued his interest. And so, anytime when you're doing a deal, anytime that you have the opportunity to exceed the seller's expectations by taking a certain action in a deal, again, the best deals are win-win for everyone, right? So I had the ability to get him more than what he was asking, and that really interested him. The sixth thing that I did is I really helped him paint what his dream outcome was. And we vividly walked down that path, right? So one example when I did this is when I asked him, "What would you do with an extra 500,000?" And he was like, "Well, I would do this, or I would do this, or I would do this." And I vividly walked him through the worst case scenario, right? We actually walked down that path as well. So a lot of times walking sellers down their dream outcome, like what is the thing that they want more than everything else, and you actually vividly go there in their mind and you talk through that, that can really help paint this picture and create a lot of emotion. And the seventh thing that I did is exactly what I just said. I directly confronted his biggest fears by walking through that worst case scenario, helping him realize that the worst case scenario wasn't actually that bad. And how many times do our sellers, or even us, how many times do we fear taking an action? But when we actually go through in our head what would happen if that action transpired, we're like, oh, yeah, I guess I wouldn't die if that happened. And so I helped him through that scenario, and that helped him move beyond and make a decision that was actually empowering for him. And so that's it. That's how I closed this deal. I hope that was helpful for you guys to hear about. I know it's helpful for me to kind of extrapolate, listen to all of the call recordings, and then pull out what learnings that I have from this recording so that I can take them into my next ones. And that's a big reason why I made this episode. But I also wanted to make it in the event that it might give you guys some value as well and help you maybe break some beliefs out there with your sellers and establish some good win-win scenarios and get some more deals done and make some more money. So hope you guys enjoyed that. Thank you for listening. I appreciate you guys. I love you guys. And I'll see you in the next one.